Boss fights are supposed to be the hardest things in the game. You're supposed to ramp up the difficulty. It's supposed to get crazy. But what happens when they just don't stop? Like the Energizer Bunny, they keep going and going and going. I don't know, do people know the Energizer Bunny anymore? It doesn't matter. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 boss fights that were way too long. Starting off with number 10, it's Ultima from Final Fantasy 16, which came in a little less than an hour. There's a lot of long as hell bosses in Final Fantasy 16. The Titan boss fight seems like it goes on forever, and the Bahamut boss fight feels like you're at the end of the game. It's so bombastic and extended, but those fights are nothing compared to the actual final boss of the game, who is Ultima. Under the best circumstances possible, this guy will take just under an hour to beat. And it's not one of those slow turn-based bosses. Final Fantasy 16 is a full-on action game like Devil May Cry. So you got to be focused for the entire thing, and man, it'll wear your brain out. The first part of the battle is mostly cinematic, but there is a health bar. There is a fight going on here, even if it's like half cutscenes. It's mostly a lot of flying around and pressing buttons and watching the pretty colors. Not a lot to it, but I mean, it goes on for a while. That kind of sums up the whole fight, actually. Next is a one-on-one fight with the regular Ultima, and then another icon battle where it's a Freet versus a powered-up Ultima, before the fight finally and mercifully ends with the final fight against an even more powered-up, you guessed it, Ultima. It is one escalation after another. Even compared to the absurdly long battle in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, this one beats it in terms of length. Not so much complexity, though. It's mostly a slugfest, and I mean, I'm not going to deny how epic the whole thing is. If Japan knows how to do something well, it's make these absurd, over-the-top boss fights. But if there's another thing they know, it's how to make them a little too long.
That's my boy!
At number 9 is Asura's Wrath's Chakravartin. This guy comes in just over an hour. Basically a shonen battle manga on steroids. Asura's Wrath is a game that manages to go over the top, and then it goes way beyond, and then it finds some new abstract way to be over the top compared to that, and then all logic begins to break down. I've pretty much described to you the true final boss of Asura's Wrath. The creator of the universe, the embodiment of the Wheel of Life, the god of Mantra, and the ruler of Nakra, Chakravartin. I mean, our man's got so many titles, just to say it all is kind of like the boss fight. Takes a long time. Hell, just his name, Chakravartin. What the hell? Chakravartin. Sounds like some kind of nut and chocolate brittle candy of some kind. Break off a piece of that Chakravartin, man. I like the pecans. Or whatever. That sounds like a snack that wouldn't actually take a lot to get through. Sounds delicious. This boss, on the other hand, never freaking ends. Lasts at minimum for an hour. And depending on how you count it, it's easily more like an hour and a half. His first form is somehow the least crazy, being this angelic Buddha-looking guy with a ton of arms. This is the prologue to the boss fight, though, because his next form is a big old gold statue, and when I say big, I mean real big. Bigger than a galaxy. One hell of an escalation, buddy. And he's not messing around anymore. He's throwing giant planet-destroying laser beams at you, along with entire moons and planets as projectiles. Not cool, man. So you beat that, you get a rematch with his godly form, and then comes a final battle with a pure white void, and he goes absolutely nuts on you here. It's one of the most over-the-top, ridiculous battles ever put in a game, and it's not actually even part of the regular game. Yeah, this is the part you have to buy on top of the game. Yeah, they just broke off the last section of the game and made it a DLC, which obviously sucks, but it does not take away from just how incredibly long this final battle is. At number 8 is the secret final boss from Octopath Traveler 2. In the land of JRPGs, exhaustingly long boss battles are, well, pretty common. When you're a kid, you think epic fights like Kefka from Final Fantasy VI or Sin from Final Fantasy X are long, but they ain't got nothing on the oversized and absurd secret bosses from the Octopath games. There's the standard secret final boss, which is a massive time sink, all on its own, but the super secret final boss, even worse. It's got multiple forms, an absurd amount of HP, and all kinds of crazy bullshit attacks that can easily wipe out your whole party. This thing is the worst of both worlds. It's exhaustingly long and it's extremely tricky. Every form has multiple parts you'd have to target. They all do something terrible. It's rough. There's so many little moving parts that you got to keep track of. The amount of damage this thing has taken in the many different ways you can see it off make the fight longer. It's practically a puzzle boss. Usually a puzzle boss in an RPG is pretty easy once you figure out the gimmick, but this guy keeps changing up the gimmick, and even if you know it, being able to always counter it, it's not so certain. Even as far as absurd JRPG battles go, this is one, it goes above and beyond with its length. You can easily end up fighting this thing for over an hour or more, and that's pure fight. There's no cutscenes, no fluff, just a big wall of HP you gotta cut down.
I summon Grant, the Thunder Blade.
And number 7 is Zed from Xenoblade Chronicles 3. A lot of long fights in the Xenoblade games. You maybe even thought of that when you heard the title of this video. You can tell this series takes a whole lot of inspiration from MMOs, where gigantic damage sponge raid bosses are real common. No other fight in the series matches up to this one in pure length, though. The final boss just takes forever. Not literally forever. More like an hour if you're lucky, an hour and a half if you're not. Like Ultima, it's a pretty cinematic fight with a lot of cutscenes, cutting in between fighting. But unlike that one, it's got 0 checkpoints. None. Not one. So if you die right at the end of the fight, sorry buddy, you gotta start that whole thing all over again. The worst part is, this thing saves its absolute worst for near the end of the fight when it splits up your party into 2 groups to fight some sub-bosses. And if you're not prepared for this, that's an hour of gameplay just right down the drain.
Stay on guard for now. You should get ready. I gotta push through this.
Doing any real significant damage to this guy is nearly impossible. You can't use any positioning attacks. Your party often spreads out so they can't take advantage of AoE healing and buffs. And did I mention that it's long? It's of course appropriately epic, but man, no checkpoints? Seriously?
What power? Crazy! This is the force of people's will!
And number 6 is the Sleeper from EverQuest. And we enter what I like to call the MMO portion of this list, because if you want boss fights that are shockingly long, these are the games you want to go to, especially the ones made before people realized that sitting around slapping a giant target for hours on end isn't actually that much fun. EverQuest wasn't the first MMO, but it gave birth to a lot of MMO conventions that come up when we're talking or thinking about it. One of those innovations was the World event. In the original version of the game, there was a zone called the Sleeper's Tomb. If you killed 4 special dragons that guarded that area, the Sleeper would wake up and go on a rampage and killed everybody that got in its way. The boss was meant to be unkillable, and for the first few years of the game's existence, it was, because it could only be triggered once per server, so if it was gone, it was gone. Nobody could even try to beat it. In 2003, one server attempted the impossible, though. Assembling over 180 players, they all worked together in an attempt to kill the unkillable boss, but after 3 hours and 15 minutes of whacking away at it, the dragon despawned either from a bug or from someone at SOE, the developers of EverQuest, intentionally pulling the dragon because no one was actually meant to kill it. There was a brief uproar, but the next day the devs relented and reset the Sleeper so people could try to kill it again. Nobody knows exactly how much health this thing's have, but estimates say probably around 250 million HP, and that was at a time when most EverQuest bosses had like 2 million HP at most, like less than 0.5% of that. It took another 3 hours, meaning it took even longer to kill than it was supposed to, and for all that effort, the players got a big load of nothing. The Sleeper had no loot table because it was never designed to be killed. It just sort of ended. Number 5 was City of Heroes, the Hamadon. As far as MMOs go, City of Heroes was meant to be a faster pace and friendlier option, right? Most raids took at most an hour or so. The bosses themselves never took more than 15 minutes to beat for the most part. There is one exception, and it's a big one. The Hamadon, a giant blob-like monster that requires up to 50 players or more to take at once, and even then it can be a struggle. For this entry, I'm talking about the old Hamadon before the game got reworked into making killing the thing faster. These days, and yeah, people are still playing this game even though it closed years ago at this point. There's actually a pretty active private server for it. People can clear this thing in like 15 minutes flat, but back in the day, even if you got a fairly well-coordinated raid group, it could take like 3 hours of non-stop combat to kill this thing. I've seen some people say that they fought it for up to 7 hours, but from everything I've read, the 3-hour number seems probably more common. What made this fight such a slog is that it was these mitochondria ads that would spawn. These things were color-coded and they had to be dealt with a special way, and you had to kill them all, otherwise they just endlessly buff the main body of the boss, and they'd make it impossible to do any real damage. Trying to fight this thing with an uncoordinated team was just a nightmare, and even if you had a decent team, you were probably going to die and get revived a lot. It's not the flashiest boss, but actually beating it was considered a badge of honor among many City of Heroes players. And number 4 is EverQuest's Avatar of War. It took a recorded 3 hours to beat the sleeper, but this thing managed to take things a little bit further even. According to the Reddit user, the new Tony Bennett, which fantastic name, sir, this boss took 3 to 4 hours to beat, and it was actually the first confirmed kill of this boss in the game. After more expansions dropped, this guy was nothing to write home about, but when he first popped up, this thing was formidable. Not in the looks department, like he's not that impressive there, but sometimes it doesn't matter if looks can or cannot kill. In terms of health and resistances, this thing was absurd. I mean, it took a guild of 60 players bashing it for 3 to 4 hours to kill it. In modern MMOs, most raid bosses don't even let you try a stunt like that. Like in WoW, for example, a lot of raid bosses have a timer, or if you take too long on them, they just wipe the entire raid. Heck, this guy has something like that. If you fight it for more than an hour, he just despawns now. It's just one example of how ridiculous a lot of raid bosses used to be in MMO games. This guy is bad, but it actually does get worse. And number 3 is Final Fantasy XII's Yasmat, another game that is heavily inspired by MMOs, and at least in the original version of the game where there was no way to speed up battles, this was a fight that took an absolute eternity. Depending on who you ask, Yasmat can take as little as an hour to finish if you know exactly what you're doing, but can take up to 7 hours. For a lot of players, it seems common that it took 5 to 6 hours to beat this thing, and that's all in real time. That's just 6 straight hours of whacking away at this thing's absolutely mad health bar. I mean, this thing's health is silly. It takes forever to knock down one of its health bars, and it's got 50. Sure, it's got tons of health, but that's only the start of what makes it so painful to fight. At 50% health, all damage this thing takes is reduced by a third, which gives a total cap to the kind of damage you can deal. The nastiest trick it has by far is when you get it down to about 5 health bars remaining. That's when it starts casting Reflect on you. So if you're not careful and you aren't paying attention, then it's, I mean, kind of likely that one of your fully automated teammates will cast a heal spell on your party and it'll reflect off of you and onto the boss. And some of them heal spells heal 100% health. If that's not a kick in the balls, I do not know what is. This is the boss that takes so long that a common tactic to fighting it is to automate your party and just leave the game running overnight. And isn't it a nice surprise going to bed expecting to find the boss dead by the time you wake up? But instead it's back to full health and you waste all that time. It's a boss all about taking advantage of automation that punishes players for automating their party. Top tier trolling. That's professional grade trolling. At number 2, it's the Pandemonium Warden from Final Fantasy XI, an MMO that was infamous for not respecting players' time. Everything took forever in this game, and it seemed like a point of pride to developers to come up with increasingly impossible bosses to overcome. Eventually, it was just too much. At a certain point, some of these fights, eventually they had to relent and make some of the bosses weaker. This is one of them. In 2008, the guild Beyond the Limitation made a concerted effort to defeat this absurdly hard boss, but they were forced to give up after 18 hours of continuous effort. It was so bad that, according to a player who went by the name of Slyfit, people were starting to pass out and get physically ill. The situation was so bad that Square had to put out a message saying they definitely care about the well-being of their players. which I'm sorry, but that's pretty funny. But nowadays, with more expansions out for the game and a higher level cap, this thing is scary, but nowhere near what it used to be. It's stuff like this that made MMO designers just ease up on crap. Because seriously, 18 hours, that's too much for a boss fight. And it should come as no surprise that number 1 is also from Final Fantasy XI. Yes, 18 hours is too long for a boss fight. No, it is not the longest in Final Fantasy XI. The longest is actually around double that, or more, depending on how things go. It's the most absurdly long boss fight of all time. This boss is infamous in the Final Fantasy XI community because, obviously, of its ridiculous difficulty level, and the dev team's insistence on making fighting this thing as miserable an experience as possible. Unlike the previous entry, this one went unchanged for a very long time. It was introduced in 2005, but by 2008, it had still never been legitimately beaten, at least according to the devs. According to the wiki page, there were multiple instances where players fought this thing for 30 hours or more. I've seen one player claim that a Link Shell or a guild in this game managed to keep fighting it for 48 hours straight. In those instances, I doubt any one player actually stayed awake the entire 30 to 48 hours. They probably fought it in shifts. But I mean, still, that's completely insane. You should not have to fight a boss in shifts. And honestly, you could fight the Pandemonium Warden in shifts. A full-time job shift is generally 8 hours. There are 18 in that boss. This boss is between 30 and 48 hours. That is a week of a full-time job. Square had no intention of ever making it any easier. In fact, they were intentionally antagonizing the community by hinting at weaknesses only to patch them out, among other things. But then the story about the Pandemonium Warden broke, and Square suddenly grew a conscience. Or more realistically, they were afraid of getting sued because people's physical health was getting involved. And they finally made Absolute Virtue somewhat reasonable to fight. So what made it such a pain? Well, it had an insane regen rate, a convoluted pattern of attacks that are hard to follow but require precise teamwork to counter, and, oh yeah, it's got a spell called Benediction, which can heal it back to full health instantly. And it basically just does it whenever it wants. It can, and will, fully heal itself after 30 hours of non-stop fighting, making everything done up to that point a complete waste of time. Now, after the nerf, there's a 2-hour time limit to beat it, which in any other game is still pretty extremely long, like excruciatingly long even. But man, compared to 30 hours, that's nothing. There's a reason boss fights like this don't exist anymore, and I don't think I need to even say what it is. Like, I have said it already, I think. I hope. If it's not clear, I do not know what would make it clear. Like, you could beat Final Fantasy 15 in the time it takes to beat this one boss. That's crazy. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.